they mocked her at boot camp. Then the commander went pale at her back tattoo from the moment Private Alina James stepped onto the dusty grounds of Fort Claymore. The whispers began. She's too small. Bet she cries in the first week. She doesn't look like she's ever held a rifle. At barely 5'2" and with delicate features, Alina didn't fit the typical image of a fresh recruit. Her voice was quiet, her stance modest, and her uniform looked 2 sizes too big. A group of male recruits snickered behind her during roll call. One of them, Hayes, leaned over and muttered, "You sure you're not lost, sweetheart? The yoga studio's down the road." She didn't flinch. Instead, Alina silently followed orders, outpaced most of the platoon in the first endurance run, and stayed deadly silent through every mocking remark. But the more she succeeded, the harder the jokes came. Even some of the drill sergeants eyed her with skepticism. "Private James," barked Drill Sergeant Carter, "you hiding ballet shoes in those boots?" Still, she didn't break. Until the obstacle course incident. During week 3, while scaling the final wall, her shirt caught on a nail with a loud rip. The back of her uniform tore open. Everyone froze. Because there, stretching from shoulder to waist, was a massive black andred tattoo, a serpent coiled around a trident, with 2 wings spread wide. But it wasn't just the ink that silenced them, it was what it meant. A dead hush fell over the recruits. One of the senior instructors, Master Sergeant Logan Stegard, a step backward, eyes wide. "No way," he whispered. "That mark? That's Unit 9. The air shifted. Commander Ellis stormed over, having seen the commotion, but when he caught sight of the tattoo, he turned pale. The blood drained from his face as recognition set. The commander had served in covert operations. He knew the symbol intimately. Unit 9 wasn't just classified, it was mythical. A Black Ops team so deep in the shadows, even high-ranking brass pretended it didn't exist. Operatives were recruited as teenagers, trained to disappear, and were considered national ghosts. Only one person had ever been known to walk away from that unit, and she had vanished after a mission gone wrong in Syria. "Ma'am," Commander Ellis corrected himself mid-sentence. "Private James, permission to speak with you in private." That night, the jokes stopped. The bullies kept their distance, and the next morning, a black SUV pulled into the base. 2 men in suits stepped out, whispered something to the commander, and handed him a red envelope. Alina opened it later, alone. Inside was a simple note: "You've been cleared. Return to Shadows when ready. Until then, show them how it's done." From that day on, no one mocked her again. In fact, the recruits started watching her, following her lead, learning. By graduation, she wasn't just top of her class, she was the quiet legend of Fort Claymore, the woman with a deadly past, and a tattoo that even commanders feared, and no one ever questioned her place again. After the day her back tattoo was revealed, everything changed, but not in the way most expected. Commander Ellis didn't reassign her, didn't try to pull rank, didn't even ask more than one question. "Why are you here?" he asked that night, in his office, doors locked, blinds drawn. Alina looked him in the eye. "Because I want to be a soldier. Not a shadow, not a weapon, just a soldier." He nodded once. That was enough. The recruits were still watching. Private Hayes, the same one who mocked her on day 1, now kept his mouth shut. During marksmanship drills, he watched Alina's stanch shoulders relaxed. Breathing steady, trigger squeezed, not pulled. Bullseye, bullseye, bullseye. She didn't miss. Ever. During hand-to-hand combat week, she volunteered to go last. Everyone else had fought already, bruised and sweating. When her name was called, the smirks returned, but not for long. Her opponent was Corporal Jansen, a brute of a man known for humiliating recruits. He charged. She sidestepped. He swung. She caught his wrist and twisted. In 10 seconds, he was flat on his back, arm pinned, unable to move. Her grip was gentle, but her eyes were like ice. No one laughed after that. Then came the field exercise, a full weekend simulating a real combat scenario. One squad had to infiltrate a mock enemy village. Alina's squad was chosen to defend. The instructors thought it would be a good way to test pressure. What they didn't expect was Alina turning the entire scenario upside down. She reorganized the defense perimeter, set up decoy flares, and created an ambush point no one saw coming. When the attackers arrived at dawn, they were outmanned, disarmed, and surrounded in minutes. Commander Ellis watched the whole thing from the surveillance tent, slowly shaking his head. "That's Unit 9 playbook," he muttered. "She could run this base if she wanted." Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she was a spy. Others swore they saw her disarm an entire gun with a paperclip. One recruit even claimed she caught a rattlesnake barehanded and let it go. Like it was a pet. Alina didn't confirm or deny anything. She just kept training. But deep down, she knew the whispers didn't matter. What mattered was control. Because when you've been trained to disappear, to end lives silently, to survive behind enemy lines with a dull knife and grit alone, boot camp felt almost peaceful. Until one night, it wasn't. A security breach, armed intruder on base. The lights went out. Panic, before the alarms even finished blaring. Alina was gone, slipped out of her bunk like smoke. By the time MPs arrived at the west fence line, the intruder was already cuffed and kneeling, breathing hard, bruised and terrified. Alina stood behind him, arms crossed, expression calm. He said he was looking for the ghost. I figured I'd introduce myself. Commander Ellis arrived a moment later. His words were quiet. You sure you don't want to come back? She shook her head. I'm done with shadows. Graduation day. When Alina walked across the parade field in full uniform, ribbons shining, in the sun, the crowd stood, even the officers. Her fellow recruits had voted unanimously she would carry the company flag. Hayes approached her afterward, nervously. I was wrong about you. Alina gave him a small smile. A lot of people are. The trick is not proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. As she turned to leave, a black SUV waited at the edge of the field, engine idling, but she didn't get in. She walked past it because for the first time in years, she wasn't someone else's weapon. She was Private Alina James. Soldier, leader, legend, and Fort Claymore would never forget the day the tattooed ghost came to life. 2 weeks later, her first assignment, Private Alina James was deployed to the 82nd Infantry Battalion at Camp Grand Juran, unforgiving training ground deep in the mountains, known for breaking even the toughest soldiers. Most new transfers were treated with caution, but Alina, she was met with silence. Her reputation had preceded her. Sergeants stood a little straighter when she passed. Officers kept their conversations hushed. No one dared to challenge her directly, but it wasn't fear she wanted. It was purpose. She found it in the form of Private Diaz. Diaz was young, clumsy, and constantly on the verge of being discharged. His boots were always untied. He could barely climb a rope wall without falling. One evening, after he failed yet another drill, Alina found him sitting alone behind the barracks, holding back tears. Why are you here? She asked quietly. To prove I'm more than a mistake, he replied. But I guess I'm not. Alina sat beside him. No one's born a soldier. It's a choice. One you make every day. I've made it thousands of times, most of them in silence. If you're serious, I'll train you. From that night on, Diaz changed. Not overnight, but steadily, purposefully, and the other soldiers noticed. Soon, others began joining her midnight sessions. Women, men, the overlooked, the underestimated. They called themselves the Ghost Platoon, nod to her nickname. Alina didn't lead it because she wanted to. She led it because they trusted her. And in every sunrise run, every brutal sparring match, and every trench crawl, something rare was happening. She was becoming a beacon, not a shadow. Then came the emergency deployment. Flash flood hit a nearby town. Military support was called in to help with evacuation and rescue. Alina and the Ghost Platoon were assigned to lead civilians through a collapsed highway, the mudslides, unstable terrain, live power lines. It was chaos, but in chaos, she thrived. She coordinated medics, carried 2 children on her back across a collapsing bridge, and even performed field surgery using only a combat knife and thread from her sleeve. Cameras caught her drenched, covered in mud, cradling an elderly woman through knee-deep water. The photo went viral, but suddenly, America wanted to know, who is the soldier with the serpent tattoo? Back at Camp Granger, she was summoned to the commander's office. Again, this time, the man waiting wasn't a base officer. It was General Hartley, a Pentagon legend. He looked at her file, then up at her. You've already served your country in the shadows, he said. Now the world sees what I've known for years. You don't just survive Chaos, command it. We're offering you a field commission, Lieutenant, effective immediately. Alina was stunned. I didn't come back for rank. He smiled. Good. That's why you've earned it. 1 month later, Fort Claymore, again a new wave of recruits stepped off the transport truck. Among them were more young women, nervous, wide-eyed, some of them already being sized up by the louder voices. But this time, they were met by Lieutenant Alina James. Same stature, same quiet presence. Only now, she wore her uniform with perfect fit and her back tattoo was no longer hidden.